day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this podcast from. My name is Brandon. I am the president and one of the co-founders of the Final Watch Veterans Foundation podcast. And today we are joined by both of my VPs, Mark and Leah. And today we have a topic that many veterans, first responders, and everyday people deal with, and that's depression. But a question that kind of coincides to what we're talking about here is we all hear about 22 a day, but what is 22 a day really? So we're going to get into a conversation about this. It's going to be, may or may not be triggering to some, but it's something that we live and deal with every single day. Depression is real, invisible wounds are real, so please do not think that you are alone. Today, we're going to be diving into something that affects millions of people, if not billions of people. I mean, there's almost 9 billion people on the planet now, but it's not being talked about enough, and that's really depression and mental health. A lot of people just think it's just people being sad, but it's a lot deeper than that. Depression is a serious mental condition that impacts how many people think, how many people, it affects the way people think, the way we feel, and everyday functions in our daily lives. Clinically speaking, depression, also known as major depressive disorder, is a mood disorder characterized by persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and loss of interest and pleasure in activities for at least 2 weeks or more. But it's not just emotional, it can affect how we sleep, the way we eat, our energy levels, and even our physical health.
Which is really important to note because people often minimize the effects that depression have on people. It's not weakness, it's not laziness, and it's not just something you can snap out of. Something that I feel people who do, I wouldn't say suffer, but do, it's something that people who have depression are often told, just snap out of it, just think of something else, but some key signs of depression can include what you just spoke about, that persistent sadness, the loss of interest in activities, changes in your sleep, either insomnia or oversleeping, fatigue and low energy, difficulty concentrating, feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt, and in a lot of severe cases, thoughts of death or suicide, unfortunately. And causes of depression can be generated from a mixture of factors, can be biological, physiological, environmental, and even trauma related. So it's a very complex issue.
So, what does depression look like? It could be silence, isolation, anger, exhaustion, feeling completely disconnected from the world. We want to have a real conversation about what it is, what it isn't, how to deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and how it affects you either in your professional life or in your private life.
So, the biggest thing, my personal experience dealing with depression, and a lot of the things that we already talked about are very true. Depression can hit everybody the same and everybody differently at the same time. I mean, we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different life experiences, different traumatic experiences, whether it's from growing up, whether you served in the military or being a first responder, things that we witness, personal family loss, witnessing horrific car accidents, having to pull bodies out of burning buildings. There's so much trauma that we as human beings experience in our lives, and not all trauma is the same. And then again, it's also the same because of the way we are as human beings. We are emotional creatures. We are self-aware of our, like, compared to every other living animal on this planet. We are the only ones that are truly self aware that our time on this earth is finite. We are here for a short period of time. We know that we will one day leave this earth. And we also see and realize how precious life can really be. And when we see things that can impact the way we try to live our lives, whether that's witnessing something that's traumatic or being abused as a child, it changes the way our brain chemistry really operates on a daily basis. In the military, we go through training, kind of like a stress training of always trying to operate in the yellow. A few different colors. You got green, which is good. Yellow means, a little under stress but aware. Orange is really under stress and aware. And then you got red, which means all out chaos and anything crazy can happen. So, and that's just been my personal experience with that kind of training. But, when we are put under an enormous amount of stress from a traumatic event, the way our brain chemistry reacts to it can be forever altered because the way, like, just from my own research, and I'm not an expert in any way as far as, human biology or, brain chemistry, but through my own research and the way it's been explained to me, is when we go through those traumatic events in our life, the neurons in our brain, which are basically the traffic lanes where all the signals and communications go, get compressed from those moments of trauma. And when they're compressed like that, just like in traffic, roadblocks or, bumper to bumper traffic happens in your brain. And that's typically where, anxiety and depression can set in because it's your brain and your body not able to effectively communicate to work through a solution or a problem that could be, triggering. So, like, for example, something that, could be just a whatever, stepping on a toy from like one of your kids, most parents get a little upset, move on past it. Whereas somebody who has had a lot of traumatic stuff happen to them and those neurons get compressed, that could be a triggering event where, basically your brain takes an off ramp and it can be chaos in a second. I mean, that's just like one example, but basically like a triggering event where, your brain's not able to process those emotions properly because those neurons are compressed. That's why we end up having those meltdowns or trigger events or anxiety attacks, because it's our brain and our body not able to effectively communicate to work through a stress or a solution.
So that
That's just been my personal.
So that phenomenon that you're describing is actually called amygdala hijack. Basically what happens is when you're experiencing a triggering event, the pathway between your logical brain and your emotional brain gets essentially severed. You're not able to you're basically like you do end up going into meltdown mode because your logical brain is not able to communicate with you. You are fully fueled by your emotions. And kind of a way around that is to recognize your triggers and know before you're getting swept away on the proverbial current of your emotion. It is you need to allow space to recognize, step back, and then kind of assess. And I think that that's a very difficult step for a lot of people who are experiencing those kinds of traumatic triggers constantly. And I think as time goes by, you do get a lot better at recognizing it, but freshly undealt with your own emotions, it's very, very hard to recognize that. And generally, that can manifest as anger, that can manifest as emotional crying, or you could just completely shut down. It's the whole fight, flight, or flee scenario.
So, for those of you that don't understand what triggered means, it refers to an intense, involuntary, emotional, or physical reaction, such as fear, panic. It's caused by specific internal or external stimulation. So, it's basically like a survival based or fight or flight response. It's not an easy thing, it's very discomforting, but people tend to find other ways to get out of that depression stage. There's some people that stay in it and they just put on a mask, and that mask is their out.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off of that, as far as wearing a mask, honestly, I think we all do at some point or another during our daily lives or, interactions with complete strangers, going to the store. The general question, like, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, good. That'll be 75, whatever. A lot of our social norms, can be, I guess, just to hammer home about the, hey, how are you doing today? First off, that person that asked that question at the counter really doesn't care. That's a lot of just, corporate training or, customer service training to, basically greet the customer, ask them how they're doing. Do you really care how they're doing? No. And, let me ask you this. If you've ever worked in customer service and you've used that line of, like, hey, how you doing today? And somebody just unloaded their whole life story on you. I can probably count maybe two or three times on one hand where somebody actually said, you know, I'm not doing that great today. My dog just died or whatever. Like they actually start going into, what's how their day is going. And then you then become like an impromptu therapist at the checkout counter or, whatever line of work you might be in. Has any of those kind of experiences ever happened to you?
So, working in customer service, working for Best Buy, working for just retail, period, that's one thing that they would want you to ask is open ended questions, asking the customer to open up. I went a different way about it because my first experience was asking somebody that came in, that they were just looking, and I went up to them and I was like, "Hey, how's your day? Are you doing okay? How's it going? What can I help you find?" And it just like they dropped the whole story on me. When I ended up becoming supervisor, I started teaching my people to not ask the "Hey, how are you doing?" question. It's more the "Hey, what brings you in today?" Because if you ask them the "How you're doing," you never know what that response is going to be. I do that even when I go live. Leah's been there a couple times. There's one of my followers that every time she comes in, I ask, "Hey, how's it going? How are you doing today?" And it's always a negative answer. I'm not sure if she's depressed, but I know I feel it. I feel it heavy every time I ask her how she's doing. And then she just comes in and just lays it on me. It's always something. But you're always going to have that. You're always going to have that reaction with some people. That they're always going to be that negative response. They have reaction symptoms where it triggers them to speak the negative and not the positive.
Well, I think that, back to the original kind of topic we were discussing, the masking, I think we all have to do it to a certain extent, right? Because it is socially inappropriate to just unload your entire life's problems. I remember walking around shortly after my daughter passed away, and people would be like, "How you doing? What, like, how's it going?" And I knew that in my heart, like, it's just not socially acceptable to be like, "I'm awful. My daughter just passed away and my husband just left me and took my kids." Like, that wasn't their burden to think about, you know what I mean? And so when I was going about my day-to-day shopping at Walmart, going and to the local gas station, and I don't know if you guys have this kind of situation, but you get this rapport with your gas station cashiers. They want to know how you're doing in actuality. It's just not your responsibility to, like, it's not their responsibility to hear your life story about that. And I think, to me, like, I had to mask how I was really doing for a very long time. People would ask me, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, how do I answer any other way other than not good at all? My entire, like, I've hit my personal rock bottom, and how do you not burden these people with that information? So I think, you know, and so I think with, obviously, our training, Brandon, you touched on kind of that operating in the yellow, and I know we've touched on this kind of operating in the orange, operating in the yellow. You learn to push that all down. I think something military members and first responders are very, very good at doing is compartmentalizing a lot of our personal issues and shoving them into a box and shoving them into a box. And that's great to get you through the here and now. But like something that has been shoved with too much stuff in a small box, it is going to leak out eventually. And it's not always going to leak out at the most appropriate times. And so for me, I remember being very angry for a very long time, very snappish, very get away from me. I would get overstimulated very, very easily. And if I was, like, because I didn't want any more outside input, I just wanted to kind of essentially put myself in a box where everything, no outside stimuli, no, like, nobody touching me, nothing of that sort. And it was really hard for a very long time to kind of deal with that. And it took me probably a year or so of therapy to kind of get through that.
First off, Leah, thank you for sharing that. I know that's not easy to talk about, And you're right. It's very hard to, after experiencing a loss like that, and somebody just asks you like, "Hey, how you doing? How's your day going?" And then it's like putting that burden of everything that you're going through onto somebody else. I think what a lot of people don't really realize is that not everyone's a therapist. Not everyone is capable of actually just sitting there and listening and actually offering either good advice or good ways to process your depression, your grief, your guilt, like anything along those lines. Not everybody is a therapist, and that's why there are therapists, and that's why you have to have degrees and everything for it. I mean, I will say a lot of times for situations not like yours, Leah, I guess I don't want to say probably less severe, because that's probably one of the most severe traumatic experiences any parent, let alone a human being, can experience is the loss of a child. For many of us, the different traumas or experiences that we may have that could lead to maybe some mild depression or some mild anxiety. Whereas, situations like that maybe, it could just take a perfect stranger to talk to help you work through it, or just willing to listen to you. But I do believe there is a difference in severity when it comes to, traumatic experiences that lead to the major depression, the major anxiety disorders that we live with day to day. But yeah, as far as the other side of the coin with that too is, with depression, we see, and I'm guilty of it as well, of making depression or dark posts. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of that is really just me being able to vent it out. Am I opening myself up to criticism and bashing online? Absolutely. But at the same time, it can also help somebody that might be going through something similar, but doesn't have a capability or the the courage to post something like that themselves. So posting that kind of content now and again, letting down my walls, letting you know what's going on inside my brain. But then where I'm focusing on is making it through the depression, making it through the sadness, making it through the anxiety, about saying like, like my most recent posts, I'm not wearing the uniform. I may not be, fighting a battle, you know, or a war in some foreign land, but fighting a battle in my mind. I'm fighting a war in my mind right now, and letting people know that are also fighting that battle and that fight, that they're not alone. There's other people fighting that battle and fight as well. And it is important to reach out, but the hardest part is finding that person that's actually willing to listen to you, willing to accept you for who you are without fear of judgment or belittling. Because, the biggest problem, especially within the veteran community, as you know, Leah, it becomes a dick measuring contest when it comes to trauma or experience. Basically, everything becomes a competition, and we end up basically trying to say who has it worse. But there's I believe, quite a few good people out there to willing to listen and help point you in the right direction. Escalation of care, all our military training. If we don't have the answers, we're gonna point you in the right direction or escalate you to the next echelon of care to, get what you need to keep moving forward, to keep you in the fight.
And I think
And
that,
that's the thing, right? Sorry.
you go, Mark.
Go ahead, Leah.
Well, I think that it's a very excellent point. I think there's also that other sign, there is that proverbial competitive nature, but what do you expect when you put a group of people in a highly competitive service branch? Brandon and I, Mark, somewhat, we all talk about our reference is the Marine Corps. And so I'm not really sure. I can't really speak on other branches, but I know in the Marine Corps, everything is highly competitive. Everything is, you don't score below an 80% on a test or it's a failure, which in the real world, that's a B. Like if we score a C on one of our Marine Net courses or on one of our, any kind of testing, that's a failure. And so it brings us up in this highly competitive nature. Who's going to look the best? Who's going to PT the fastest? Who's, and it's this pecking order that we automatically put people in. And that does translate over to trauma sharing. However, I do want to preface this by saying, like, yes, there are degrees of trauma, but that does not make someone else's trauma invalid. So, like, obviously I am dealing with child loss. I am dealing with all of that trauma, and while many people will say that that is like the worst imaginable scenario, that doesn't minimize somebody else's unique circumstance as well. They have trauma, they have triggers. I have trauma, they have triggers. Someone that's been to war, I have no frame of reference for that because I thankfully, and I will say this thankfully, was serving in a garrison Marine Corps and never had to experience that kind of trauma. And so I think that it's hard for veterans and first responders to kind of reach out because it's like, oh, well, like, suck it up. It's also that kind of mentality that we've spoken about before of walk it off, suck it up. I think the culture was starting to shift as I got out of the Marine Corps, but it was like, oh, don't you dare go to medical, don't you dare seek help, all of that stuff. And so we kind of have this like response to seeking help and seeking counsel from other people as well, because it's that chest beating, like, oh, you're not alpha male if you have to seek help. And that's just simply not true. It just simply is not true. And, we are a brotherhood, but simultaneously we love to tear each other down. And so it kind of leaves people in the middle with this sense of unsuredness. Oh, I will do anything for you because you say you are Marine, we are all green, but not that. But suck it up, be a man, do all of that. And it's such a weird juxtaposition to find yourself in, especially if you are sitting deep in the pits of your own depression. I think that it's really important who you surround yourself with and who you let onto your counsel. So I wanted to point that one out as well.
And that's the thing, right? You got to find that circle. You got to find that support. And, with, either depression, whatever you're going through, it doesn't matter. You have to have that circle of support. And that's why, creating the foundation, I think, is important to have that open door policy where if somebody wants to come in and wants to talk, then that's what we're here for. That's why we created the Discord. That's why I created the Discord. It's to bring people in together, because not only making the videos that Brandon makes on the TikTok page, it doesn't necessarily target just the fallen heroes. It targets the families, and it's not just military first responders that deal with depression or that go through depression. It's family members. They lost a loved one and they don't know how to deal with that loss, or they don't know any information about them if they've lost them years ago, but they want to get to know who that person was and they want to have closure. So they go through a stage of depression as well. So just for everybody here watching, I just let y'all know that we do have a Discord available for you, so you to come in and you to talk to somebody. We have an open circle, so y'all can come in and discuss anything, get it off your chest. Don't take the easy way out. I know it sounds hard saying that, but it's easier to fight than to take the easy way out, because you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting your family members, you're hurting other people that love you. So if you have any issues and you want to talk about it, come to our Discord, come talk to us. That's what we're here for.
Right. And especially, what you're saying, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that may not feel like it in the moment. And I know, sometimes it may feel easier if you're just not there. I personally haven't dealt with those kinds of ideations. I'm more of I would like to pop into a cryogenic chamber and then emerge when I feel like it kind of person. But it is interesting to, once you gain perspective, I think with the perspective I've gained, because I think I'm 3 years out from probably the most traumatic event of my life, it really was a temporary problem. Like I slowly did get better. I slowly came out of the mud, if you want to say. But it's interesting how hopeless you can feel in the moment, and I think I understand that very deeply. But it is temporary. This too shall pass, to quote Tolkien. But the darkness isn't going to be here forever, and eventually the sun will come back out. And I know that probably sounds like some starry-eyed optimism, but it really is the truth. And I think, talking about this right now at this point in time in the year, because it's February 28th when we're recording this, but the sun is starting to come out around the world. Spring is starting to spring. Seasonal depression is a very huge factor. I think the three of us all have been dealing with that as of late. I know that, Brandon deals with it. I know that I had to take a hiatus for about a week because of my seasonal depression. And it's amazing. It's truly amazing what happens when you go touch some grass and let the sun hit your skin. I know it sounds like crazy or hippie or whatever, but like being in nature and allowing yourself to see that the sun is coming back out is such it's amazing how your mood can shift from like down into today's a good day, I'm gonna get all this stuff done, the sun is shining, I'm happy to be alive. And it will come, the day, it'll pass, the sun will come back out, the flowers will bloom, and life will go on. So
Yeah, and another thing too is a lot of our moods can be affected by our environment. Like the seasonal depression that you just touched on causes us to, stay inside because it's snowy or it's wet, it's rainy outside and cloudy and looking like the frickin' movie Twilight where there's never any sunshine. And that could be just depressing in itself. But yeah, it's amazing how our environment of like where we live or when the sun is shining, like hey, I remember hearing it all the time in the news growing up. Hey, the sun's shining. Get out there and enjoy it. Go get some gardening done. Mow the lawn or whatever, just do something outside. Take a picnic to the park, like little things like that are so good for not only our physical health, absorbing, all that sunshine, but then also our mental health on top of it. It's like, especially for me, because I live up in God's country of Idaho, where our wintertime up here is like 90% no sun, just cloudy and overcast. There's a reason why they filmed all that in freaking Washington, which is right next door, because the weather over there is the same over here for Twilight. Anyways, for all my Twilight nerds out there, and yes, I grew up with that because that was the hot thing when I was in high school, and my wife was Team Jacob. Anyways, just had a little laugh in there for you. With that being said, guys, honestly, when it comes to depression and anxiety, it's something that we all deal with. We're always told reach out 988, 911 for emergencies, etc. You want to have that good buddy, gal to reach out to when you're in your darkest moments. Because I'm going to tell you something, as somebody who has experienced more funerals than most, for those of you that are listening in and don't know, my last 3 years was being a funeral uh, staff non-commissioned officer in charge for the United States Marine Corps, and I can personally conducted and handed off over 300 American folded flags to families that lost a loved one. And I can tell you, we'll hear so many people's stories. You'll hear their legacies of what they leave behind, some good, some bad. And I'm going to tell you something in regards to the 22 a day, which I've unfortunately had experience with. Your legacy at that point, if you go out at via 22 a day, that's going to be the last thing that they're going to remember about you is the way you went out. And it is not something that is that can be ever glorified. It's not something that can ever be romanticized. It is probably the most selfish thing a human being can do by leaving this earth early like that. And like you were saying earlier, your pain, your suffering doesn't end with you by taking your own life. You only pass it on to those that were close to you. And now they have to shoulder that burden rather than working together to share that burden while you're still here and stay in the damn fight.
That's the thing. You got to prove them wrong, you know? You got to prove them wrong. You got to show them that you're strong enough to fight it out. You're strong enough to stay here. So you got to stand on your feet, get up, don't let them think that you're lazy. Don't let them think that you're weak. You're stronger than that. You've made it this far. You can make it further. So all you got to do is if you have to talk to somebody, reach out and talk to somebody. If you have to depress, because that's what depression is. You're depressing. You're taking all that pressure and you're just letting it out on your own time, your own methods, and don't let people see it. You know, if you have to close yourself up and you have to sit in the darkness for a day or two, do that, depress. But you know what? Come out stronger. Stand up, put your bootstraps on and go about your day. Let them see that you're strong enough that you can make it.
And with that being said, guys, today's topic is something that we all experience regardless of what we do in a professional career status. And like I said, we can all experience trauma and we can all react to it differently in the same all at the same time. The biggest thing is knowing who is in your corner and reaching out to the right people and letting people know what's going on with you and not necessarily completely closing yourself off, because the reality is the ones that commit suicide or take that early exit, a lot of times most people have no idea. Like, oh, I had no idea that person was depressed, or I had a few Marines that were just studs, PT studs, PME complete, did their job well and everything else. Next day they're gone because they were having that mask on so well that nobody had any idea. So that is why it is important to ask those questions now and again and to probe a little bit, find out what's going on. But that's also a reminder that if you have people in your circle, know what's going on in their personal life. If you really are friends, if you really are, buddies, you should take it upon yourself, and they should as well, to get to know what's going on in your personal life, who your mom is, who your dad is, who your brother, your sister, your kids. We should share that information with each other, because if we're already friends, it's already establishing a level of trust. And, obviously you want to have dividers, if you want to have like associates, friends, best friends, whatever. But if you have those few individuals that are in your circle, the ones that you can rely on and reach out to, you should know at least a little bit about their personal lives and their interests and everything else. That way, if something's not going their way, you can kind of call them out and be like, hey, are you sure you're okay? Because your team won in the Super Bowl, but you're not happy about it. You know what I mean? Like little examples like that. Situational awareness, and sometimes it can be like those little quips or those little questions that can get them to stop, think, open up, say, well, no, here's what's really going on. And then just that little question, pardon me, probably prevented something worse from happening.
No, I think it's really important to kind of understand where your friends are. And I think that, my most recent realization is the two of you. I will admit the last month or so for me has been really, really hard. And you guys noticed. You guys called me out on it. Hey, where you been? Hey, you haven't been hanging out with us. Hey, why aren't you replying in the group chat? And I think it's important to understand your loved one's normal behavior, your friends' normal behaviors, to see what's going on with you, or is everything okay at home? Are you okay? And I think even if that person is deciding to self-isolate and take a little bit of time off, at least they know that somebody gives a shit about them. I had you, Brandon, and I had you, Mark, and I regrettably did not have the mental energy to message you guys back, but you both reached out to me independently, over the last couple of weeks of me struggling mentally. And it felt nice. It was like, wow, these people actually care whether or not I'm okay, not whether or not I'm alive, but that I'm okay, that I'm a fully formed and functioning human being. And I think that, for people who are listening, even if, you reach out to someone and they don't necessarily reach back, the message was received. They probably saw your message. They see that somebody cares. And, I've heard stories of people very close to me, that they were going to do it. They were going to take that irrevocable step, and they got a phone call from somebody. And that person was like, hey, I just wanted to tell you I love you. And they stayed earthside. And so, you see something, say something, notice something, care about the people that you love. Because again, like Brandon was saying, people can be masking so well. They can be the happiest person you know. They could literally be a ball of sunshine outwardly, and you will never know what is going on with them. So, I've said this multiple times, I think, on our podcast, but tell your friends you love them and make it weird. Who cares? At least somebody knows that they are loved, they are cared for, and somebody gives a shit that they're on this earth. So that is my little piece to leave you guys with on this topic.
Thank you, Leah.
And on that note, we're not professionals. We're just here to help one another. We're human beings. We want to help you stay focused on your life, not to bring you down. So whether you go and approach this in a medical way, emotionally, spiritually, or all three, just know that there's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Just know that your family loves you, your friends love you, and we love you. We want to make sure that you share this episode, start a conversation, and make sure that you know that we're going to be here next week looking out for you. So make sure that you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram, Facebook, any platform that you see, look up The Final Watch. If you need somebody to talk to, join our Discord because we're here for you.
Absolutely. And with that, guys, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next week. Super Fidelis, and we have the watch.